Welcome back. You watch your Morning Live. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Now, after spending 26 years and 3 months in prison, 18 of which were on Robben Island, Ahmed Kathrada dedicated his time to transforming the image of Robben Island from being a place of hardship and pain to being a place of freedom and triumph for the human spirit. In his latest book, The Triumph of the Human Spirit, a coffee table book, Kathrada captures his 300 visits to Robben Island with guests from around the world, including celebrities, children, and heads of state. Mr. Kathrada joins me now in studio to talk about the book. Sir, thank you very much for joining us here in Morning Live. This must be such an amazing project for you, and I can only imagine what was, by putting this project together, what was that process like for you personally?
Well, you know, I didn't start this. It was people from our foundation who were contacted. And then I was drawn into it. And then it's history.
Yeah,
this was the result.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, you obviously gone through it. Just in terms of reflecting back, you actually gone back to Robben Island 300 times.
Yeah.
Every time that process, I can only imagine that every time you step back on that island, was it a different emotional process for you, or was it a place that you thought, well, you know, in so many ways, I feel comfortable here?
No, my very first trip to Robben Island was with the media from France, television, and that was traumatic because a year after our release, when I used to pick places, halls and so forth, then you're confronted with this little cell, and that was quite a traumatic experience. But since then I've been there so many times, it's become routine now.
You launched the Triumph of the Human Spirit. What does the book represent to you? The journey that a lot of people are going to experience, I think a lot of it's going to be awe. They're going to be amazed by the pictures. But for you personally?
No, I think that not for me personally only, but I think for the general public, it once again brings Robben Island to the fore. And that is the important thing. I mean, I was just one of hundreds and thousands of people who own Robben Island who have not been talked about. Very few of us have been mentioned. Yesterday I was with Theophilus Chulo. Nobody knows about him. But he was a very crucial chap on Robben Island. So what I am hoping for is through this book and similar things, when we launch it, we'll be able to capture other people's experiences on Robben Island and not just focus on one individual.
I love what you're saying, because I do think you're right, especially as these born frees and new youth and some of us that are getting into contact with what the history of this country is all about, is that the story needs to be told from more than one perspective.
Absolutely. It has to be told. And what has to be told that, you know, about 25 of us with Madiba, we were completely isolated from, but we were only 25 to 30 the most. So isolated that President Zuma, Deputy President Atlante, they were on the island for 10 years. We never saw them. They never saw us. So what I'm saying is that we were only a handful isolated. The hundreds and hundreds of others were in the communal cells, and they are not written about.
Yeah. You start in the opening of the book, the paragraph, you say, "You have taken me out of Robben Island, but you can't take Robben Island out of me." What is it about Robben Island that you've taken with you?
No, the thing is that what I'm trying to say is that I can't get away from that because I never volunteered to go. But I'm invited over and over again. Next week I'll be going back with a group of students from the Mandela Rose Foundation. So I get invited there. So even if I want to get away, I can't. Because the invitations come there, and I find it is my duty to relate experiences firsthand. So I don't refuse these invitations, if we can be of some service in conveying the message of Robben Island.
Throughout the years, throughout these visits, you've met some highly influential people, whether it's from political, whether it's from the entertainment spaces. In those meetings, what often or not was the one question that you had to deal with?
No, you see, they hardly ask questions. It's almost a monologue. They listen to me. Now and then, of course, they ask questions, naturally, and that's expected because I can't relate every detail, and then people are interested in asking questions, which does happen.
In your coffee table, you talk about Michelle Britz, a 13-year-old girl with leukemia, and you talk about her wishes. What was her wish?
Well, you know, that was my most memorable visit, because here a child of 13, knowing she's dying of leukemia, a little Afrikaner child from Secunda, and she was so mature at the age of 13 that she knew she was dying. She had two wishes. One, to visit Robben Island, and I took her around. Two, to visit President Mandela. So when I asked Madiba whether I could bring the child to him, typical of him, he said, no, that's too much trouble for her. Let's go to her. So to cut a long story short, he got into his helicopter and went to Secunda. I was there last year visiting the parents, and they showed me the video of Madiba's visit and the 2 albums full of photographs.
Wow.
From beginning to end, he had this little child around his arms.
I want to end of this conversation because we run out of time. I'm going to urge everybody going by it. Just very quickly, you were also appointed as the chairman of Robben Island, of the Museum Council, and you ran that until 2006.
Yeah.
So just explain that to me very quickly, because this is an island that housed you as a political prisoner, and then you come back not only 300 visits later, but you're also part of making sure that the history of this island is preserved. Just talk to me about that very quickly.
Well, again, it wasn't my decision. Decisions were taken. The council was appointed. I didn't appoint the council, and I was told to take matters further, and by invitation, by request. And then, of course, the council was there, which was guiding me on what should be done and what not.
Throughout the time and throughout the experiences that people have gone, we've seen literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people go to Robben Island, and thousands of people connecting with the history of Robben Island, told, as you said, a lot of untold stories. Your sense, and I know maybe it's a bit of an unfair question, but the sense that you get from once people that have come to Robben Island for the first time, that sense that they get of that they're standing in the middle of history, that these are where the leaders were housed, where they were fighting for a free South Africa. What is that sense, that engagement, if you've ever engaged with any of them? What is the conversation back to you?
No, you see, once I'm taking them around, there are questions and answers. And 99% of the visits were very nice. There were some that were not so nice, but we won't go into them, where they were not interested at all, and there was one group which made a joke of it. But otherwise, as I said, 99% of them were quite positive.
I find the title of this book quite powerful, Triumph of the Human Spirit. And for me, I know that you're saying that was a project by the organization, but in terms of this title for you, that Triumph of the Human Spirit, if you had to reflect on that, just how powerful is this title?
So that comes from if you go to the gateway there, it comes from a quotation from me, where I say that we don't want Robben Island to be remembered for the suffering. Rather, in spite of the suffering, that should not be highlighted. It ended in victory, because seldom in the world's history have we had almost literally from prison to parliament to president. That is victory, and that should be remembered. So what should be highlighted is not the suffering, is the victory. Of course, suffering is there. We can't just wipe out years in years of suffering. But the end is what's important. And that was victory.
So we're going to leave it there. We've run out of time, unfortunately. But thank you very much for spending time with us here on Morning Live. It's one of those conversations that can go on forever. It's called Triumph of the Human Spirit. It's available in all good bookstores. We urge absolutely everybody to go and get it. It'll make a fantastic gift. It's Ahmed Kathrada and Robben Island on the jacket of the book. It's a coffee book edition, and it's Mr. Kathrada's 300 visits to with prominent people in Robben Island, and the book is available, and it goes for a measly 500 Rand. That's easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, it's time for us to say goodbye to our